नमस्ते आप सभी को और स्वागत है हमारे आज के इस विशेष सत्र में जिसमें हम अजान चा का बर्थडे को सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं।
Nikhil, we are going to have a mixed audience, so maybe we should use English generally.
Okay. So I welcome you all on behalf of Aranya Bihar Trust. Today we are celebrating 106th birthday of Ajahn Chah. We will do a short chanting, then we will see a small video depicting the biography of Ajahn Chah, and then our honorable guest will join the session and Deepti will take forward from there. So let's start with Prarambhik Vandana. Yoso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho Swakhato Yena Bhagavata Dhammo Supatipanno Yassa Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Tangmayang Bhagavantang Sadhamang Sasanghang Imehi Sakarehi Yatarahang Aropitehi Abhipujayama Sadhuno Bhante Bhagava Suchir Pariniputopi Pachima Jantanukampa Ime Sakare Dukat Parnakara Bhute Patiganhatu Amhakam Digharaktam Hitaya Sukhaya Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivadeni Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namassami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Handamayan Buddhassa Bhagavato Pubbabhaganamakarang Karomasse Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So we will look a video approximately 23 minutes long, and then we will welcome our guest.
Ajahn Chah was born in a prosperous family, but he chose to relinquish his worldly possessions to walk the path of Dharma. Although Ajahn Chah could barely speak English, he had many foreign disciples. Ajahn Chah spent most of his life in his native northeastern Thailand, but he influenced the establishment of branch monasteries across the world. Ajahn Chah was impeccably strict around moral precepts, monastic observances, and mind meditation, yet his good humor shone forth for all to see. Although Ajahn Chah was abounding in loving kindness, his disciples recount that at times he could be as fierce as a tiger. Ajahn Chah passed away 25 years ago, yet many people still study about his life and gain new perspectives on living. How did Ajahn Chah live his life? What aspects of his life offer inspiration to people today? Venerable Ajahn Chah Supatto was born in 1918 in a small village in Warin Chamrap, Ubon Ratchathani. As a boy, Chah was convivial, good-natured, and endowed with leadership qualities. He was rarely quarrelsome. Rather, he acted as a mediator when his friends were in conflict or dispute. Chah's family was considered wealthy. As a child, he went to school during the day and helped his family with household chores. For example, looking after the buffalo and tending to the tobacco plantation. Ajahn Chah once recounted that as a child, he liked to pretend to be a monk. He would don a loincloth as a robe and play the role of an abbot. His friends would pretend to be lay people, offering him food, while he gave them the precepts and a blessing. Attracted to the monastic life, when he was 9 years old, Chah asked his parents for permission to live in the monastery. At the age of 13, he took ordination as a novice. Chah spent 3 years as a novice. He then left the monastery and resumed the lay life. Apart from helping with his family's farm work, Chah lived life as other young men. He traveled about, dated girls, fell in love, and experienced a broken heart.
ชั้นชาตญาณของความรักมันก็ต้องมีกับเพศอย่างเพศชายก็ต้องมีความรู้สึกกับเพศหญิงมันก็เป็นอย่างนั้นเป็นกระแสของชีวิตจะต้องมีการเรียนรู้
To the delight of his parents, Chah took higher ordination as a bhikkhu at the age of 21. Because of his disenchantment with the world and his innate interest in Buddhism, Bhikkhu Chah had no inclination to disrobe after the rains, as was the case with most of the other young men who had been ordained at the same time. After 7 years of formal Dhamma study, during which time Bhikkhu Chah passed the top-level Naktam exams, gained enough proficiency to translate scriptures, and had provided religious education to the novices. He set out wandering on Tudong, life as an itinerant monk, considering that study of scripture on its own is not the path to freedom from suffering, and that the Buddha wouldn't have wanted monks to engage solely in formal study. He began to apply himself to meditation practice. Bhikkhu Chah, together with his Dhamma companions, walked long distances in search
Yeah, just a minute.
So just for the benefit of those of you who have joined recently, John X. Ajahn Jagaro will be with us very shortly. So we are just watching a short biographical sketch of Ajahn Chah's while we are waiting for John to join.
search of an opportunity to practice insight meditation with various meditation masters. the number of his fellow pilgrims were variable, depending on various conditions, as they wandered long distances through remote areas. As a young man, Chah had been terrified of ghosts. Meditating in secluded charnel grounds was thus a serious challenge for him to overcome his fear and gain clear insight into life and death. Another important lesson was enduring frequent sickness and extreme physical hardship during his wanderings.
ป่าช้าต้องมีสิ่งลึกลับมีผีมีอะไรทำนองนั้นมีความเงียบความสงัดแล้วก็มีความรู้สึกกลัวขึ้นมาความกลัวมันเกิดขึ้นท่านก็ถามว่ามันกลัวอะไรถ้ามันกลัวตายแล้วมันตายอยู่ที่ไหนแล้วมันก็จะตอบออกมาว่าตายมันก็มีอยู่ที่เรานี่แหละแล้วจะหนีไปไหนมันก็ถามอย่างนั้นดิมันก็คงจะได้คำตอบออกมา
ปัจจัตตังเวทิตโพวินยูหิ to be experienced individually by the wise. The profound knowledge arising from Ajahn Chah's meditation practice is an individual experience. It is not something that can be accurately put into words. But when teaching his disciples, Ajahn Chah would openly describe the passions and problems that he himself had encountered. This was a way of offering encouragement by pointing out how everyone must face spiritual challenges. He confessed that, even after being a monk for many years, lust continued to be a serious obstacle with which he had to actively combat. After 16 years of being a monk, upon invitation by his mother and other relatives, Bhikkhu Chah returned to his home village. The thick and dense Ba Pong forest was located about 3 kilometers away from Phra Chah's home village. Phra Chah brought his group of monks here to set up their forest umbrellas in March 1954. This was the starting point of Wat Nong Pa Pong, a monastery originally located in a wild and remote place, yet later became internationally renowned.
วัดหนองหัวฟงเขาก็บอกว่าเป็นพื้นที่หวาดเสียวเป็นพื้นที่ที่มีอันตรายเขาก็พูดอย่างนั้นแต่ความจริงคนเราไม่คุ้นเคยมันก็อาจจะคิดอย่างนั้นไปเป็นธรรมดาแต่ในรูปแบบของความรู้สึกอาตมาแล้วป่าให้ความอบอุ่นเห็นต้นไม้เกิดความอบอุ่นเหมือนกับเพื่อนเหมือนเรามีที่พึ่งแต่หลวงปู่อาจจะคิดอย่างนั้นก็ได้ท่านจึงเห็นว่าป่ามันเป็นที่อยู่ของพระสงฆ์เป็นพื้นที่เหมาะสำหรับการเจริญสมณธรรมและก็การประกาศธรรมด้วย
It now takes approximately 20 minutes to travel to Wat Nong Pa Pong from the district town of Warin Chamrab. But in the past, this place was far from civilization. There were no paved roads, electricity, or municipal water supply. The practices of itinerant meditation monks were largely unknown to the general public. Sometimes they were even viewed with fear and suspicion. The living conditions at Wat Nong Pa Pong were thus difficult and austere. Of all the meditation masters that he visited and studied with, Ajahn Chah recounted that it was the eminent monk, Ajahn Man Puritatto, who pointed out the way of practice, dispelling all his doubts. The style of practice at Wat Nong Pa Pong conformed to the monasteries of Ajahn Man. At the same time, it had characteristics unique to Ajahn Chah.
When he established Wat Pa Pong, it was established on the kind of style of Luang Pu Man. But the thing that Luang Pu Chah emphasized over and over again at Wat Pah Pong was a sense of samakhi, of working together, where Luang Pu Man was more or less like monks would come and go off on Tudong separately, where we had to do everything together. We had to sweep the monastery, we had to carry water together, had to meet together in the morning for puja, in the evening for puja, patimokkha every fortnight, and everybody was expected to participate. And this sense of samakhi.
Ajahn Chah set up a monastery guideline in strict accordance with the Vinaya. He emphasized mindfulness, the abandonment of fixed views, and the cultivation of wisdom. There were few rituals and much meditation practice. The monks would sleep little and eat simply. There was no making of amulets or soliciting of donations. The name and reputation of Ajahn Chah and Wat Nong Pa Pong gradually became well known and respected. Ajahn Chah trained his monks strictly, emphasizing spiritual practice, the threefold training, and a study of the monastic discipline. Yet many photographs of him give the impression that he was good-natured and even playful.
ความจริงก็ไม่ขันแต่มันเป็นกิริยา มันเป็นกิริยาของผู้ที่จะชักจูงคนต้องแสดงออกในลักษณะกิริยามากกว่าแต่มันไม่ใช่อารมณ์ขัน แต่คนก็พูดว่าเขาชอบอย่างนั้นเขาเลยว่าอารมณ์ขันทำนองนี้นะ
He had a lot of kind of charisma. His personality was very outgoing and friendly. You know, he was something that was, he could tune into people's needs very quickly. You know, you were drawn to him.
ความจริงนะท่านก็มีเมตตาความหวังดีอยากช่วยทำนองนี้นะเหมือนบางอย่างมาแล้วท่านจะเหมือนกับดุบอกว่ามันควรที่จะเปลี่ยนเขาบ้างดูแล้วก็มีความหวังดีอยู่อาตมามีความรู้สึกว่าท่านให้ความเคารพต่อพระวินัยทุกสิกขาหมดจะไม่ให้ความรู้สึกบกพร่องผิดพลาดเพราะท่านก็ย้ำของท่านอยู่ตลอดถ้าทำอย่างนั้นอย่ามาอยู่กับผมถ้าพูดอย่างนั้นนะ อย่าว่าดุก็ไม่ใช่
Some monks say he was very fierce. And he could be quite stern. I would put it more in the English sense of being stern. I never felt he was angry in some kind of losing his mindfulness. But I think he could be very strict, very stern. And I appreciated that, you know. So I never felt, even when he would scold me or correct me, I never suspected it was just from being in a bad mood. It had a point to it. He was using it to help me rather than just to make it, letting a kind of emotion take him over.
The number of Wat Nong Pa Pong branch monasteries gradually increased in every region of the country. At the same time, although Ajahn Chah could speak almost no English, his distinct style of practice of speak little, focus on the mind, attracted the interest of foreigners devoted to studying Buddhism.
During that time, people have asked about how could you learn when you had no common language. And Luang Por Chah was always saying it's just a matter of training, you know, of learning, because the Dhamma isn't about language, isn't dependent upon language. It's about action and speech and right attitude and being mindful, being aware.
Ajahn Chah's practice is a testament to people's spiritual potential in the present time. When people practice well, practice uprightly, practice with integrity, and practice appropriately, according to the way revealed and declared by the Buddha, path and fruit is proven to not be obsolete. Realization is immediate, verifiable, and manifest. These truths are universal. They are attainable to all people, regardless of race, language, or culture.
ส่วนมากท่านก็ทำให้ดูท่านจะนอนน้อยเรื่องความอดทนก็มากเพราะท่านฝึกมาแล้วทำนองนี้เกิดความชำนาญแล้วในเรื่องนี้ไม่ยุ่งยากไม่ลำบากทำงานก็เหมือนกันไม่เคยเห็นว่าท่านบอกให้หยุดงานทำนองนี้นะทำกิจวัตรแต่ท่านไม่เรียกว่างานหรอกท่านเราเรียกกิจวัตรอันใดที่มันเป็นประโยชน์ต่อการเป็นอยู่มันก็ให้ทำก็นำพาด้วยเวลากลางคืนมาตี 3ท่านให้รู้จักการพักผ่อนหลับนอนมันก็ได้ความเข้มแข็งมีความรู้สึกหนักแน่นถ้าเกิดความเคยตี 3เป็นเรื่องธรรมดาวันพระท่านก็บอกว่าต้องไม่นอนถ้าคนที่มีความคุ้นเคยมันเป็นเรื่องธรรมดานอนก็ได้ไม่นอนก็ได้มันเป็นเรื่องธรรมดาอย่างนั้นนี่เป็นลักษณะของทุดกกติกาก็คือทุดกนี่แหละ
Just from my impressions, his way of teaching was very direct and simple. Buddhism can sound very complicated. In so many ways, Buddhism is taught through profanity, through customs, through various teachings that sound to Westerners very complicated, and at first they don't comprehend what all that means. Like Four Noble Truths, which is a simple enough teaching, but nobody in the West had ever taught the truth of suffering. So there's a lot of doubt about that.
More and more foreigners were attracted by Ajahn Chah's way of teaching. He was later invited by a Buddhist organization in England to give teachings in London.
He was beyond culture, he had the wisdom to adapt to any kind of situation. And that's what was so impressive, because it wasn't like he was just a Thai cultural paragon, he was also just a developed human being, a wise human being, that one could sense that even if you weren't Thai or couldn't understand Thai language. He understood the world, understood Dhamma. So the world, whether it was in the context of Thailand or England, didn't really make that much difference, because he was teaching a universal teaching rather than just a cultural one. And that's why attracted so many foreigners, why there's so many praparang in Thailand and in the Western world at this time.
At present, foreigners in many countries have the opportunity to practice and develop themselves following the Buddhist teachings at Wat Nong Pa Pong branch monasteries that have sprung up and prospered around the world. All of this started at a modest monastery in northeastern Thailand by a Buddhist monk who took no delight in material gain, abandoned his worldly possessions, and accumulated noble treasure in line with monastic discipline. He then shared this wealth with his fellow human beings. Ajahn Chah possessed the marvel of instruction. His teachings were authentic. He has led people to see the truth. By following his teachings, his disciples have garnered the genuine fruits of spiritual practice. Examining Ajahn Chah's life, practice, and teachings, we see a life full of learning, determined effort, and experimentation culminating in realization. We also witness a life of simplicity, contentment, kindness, and purity, free from distress and anxiety. His life was focused on benefiting other people and everything around him. Ajahn Chah's teachings are like a lantern illuminating the entire world. This stands in contrast to his body, which aged and withered according to the natural law of transience and change. This was another truth he revealed through his silent teaching he gave for almost a decade.
อาตมาว่าหลวงพ่อชาท่านมีความรู้สึกบริสุทธิ์พูดอย่างนั้นทุกอย่างท่านจะอยู่อย่างเรียกว่าไม่ให้มีส่วนบกพร่องแม้กระทั่งชีวิตตอนที่ท่านจะมรณภาพร่างกายสังขารใช้มานานมันก็ทรุดโทรมมันก็เสื่อมสภาพเราก็ดูแลรักษากันไปก็ไม่มีอะไรมากแค่นั้น
He's an inspiring figure, and he's a modern person. So it's not like when you're talking about the Buddha, you're talking almost like a mythical person, someone from the past. But in terms of my experience, this was I knew him personally, lived with him. So you can see, that this is possible, for all of us. Enlightenment or seeing clearly and being free from delusion is a reality in the present. It's not just some ideal that that might happen or that
Prapotiyanten Ajahn Chah passed away peacefully before dawn on 16th January 1992. His flesh decayed according to the laws of nature, but his life account and his virtues have lived on for a quarter of a century in the form of his teachings and style of practice, consonant with the ideals of a disciple of the Buddha. This was the Dhamma legacy left behind by Ajahn Chah, an illustrious monk of the present era.
ญาติโยมทั้งหลายที่มาบำเพ็ญบุญบำเพ็ญกุศลในวันนี้หรือทุกวันที่ไหนก็ตามให้โยมระลึกถึงคุณพระพุทธเจ้าระลึกถึงคุณพระพุทธเจ้านั้นระลึกยังไงว่าพระพุทธเจ้าท่านทำยังไงท่านพูดยังไงท่านสอนยังไงก็ระลึกถึงคุณท่านเราก็รู้จักคุณของท่านแล้วเราก็ปฏิบัติตามธรรมะคำสอนของท่านนั้นก็เรียกว่าเราปฏิบัติตามธรรมะเมื่อเราปฏิบัติเข้าไปใกล้ธรรมะเราก็เข้าใกล้พระพุทธเจ้าเมื่อเราเห็นธรรมะเราก็เห็นพระพุทธเจ้า
Okay, friends. So welcome everyone. Before we start, I'll just make some brief introductions, though Deepti will do the more formal introducing. So just about the group here in India that's hosting this evening's session, the Aranya Vihar Trust. Many of you are familiar, but for those who are not, is a group of lay stewards in India that are attempting to host a branch of Wat Pah Nanach Chat here in India. And over the last few years, there has been much that's in progress in this direction. And so one of the activities that the group does is observe major occasions during the calendar, either to do with the life of the Lord Buddha himself, or for those teachers closer to us, such as Ajahn Chah and so forth. And so it's in this context this evening we are all meeting. And so what we have done over the last few years is, invite those people who had the good fortune, the opportunity to live with Ajahn Chah and share some of their reminiscences, some of the lessons they learned, and just generally how it was living with Luang Por Chah. So this evening we are very fortunate, very lucky, and very grateful to John, who for about 10 years was in Thailand, living partly at Wat Pa Nanachat and partly in Wat Papong. Then he was known as Venerable Jagaro, later Ajahn Jagaro. And for somebody like myself who spent some years there, people like John have a considerable legacy there, especially he is even today remembered in very glowing terms, known to be very dynamic, very charismatic, apparently a very, very fluent speaker of Thai, a teacher much sought after, especially when Wat Pa Nanachat was set up. So as I remember, John was, or Ajahn Jagaro then was the third abbot of Wat Pa Nanachat, I believe between perhaps 1979 and 1982. So I'd just like to also, I think it's fair to say that for us now, a few generations down, we feel much gratitude to people like him. And also this evening, I notice we also have Joseph Campbell with us, who was then Ajahn Papakaro, also one of the early pioneers at Wat Pa Nanachat. So it's people like them, because of whom we continue to, have this unbroken stream of Dhamma from Ajahn Chah down to this time. So with gratitude, we look forward to hearing John's account of the time that he spent with Ajahn Chah. So Deepti, please take over and take us through the evening.
Thank you very much, Bhante Mahapanyu, and very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. Welcome, Catherine and Joseph as well. It was 2 years ago that we had the fortune to have Joseph speak with us here on this very occasion. And today we have John. John, thank you for joining. Greetings.
Well, thank you, Deepta. Thank you for inviting me. Do you want me to?
Yes. So, John, I'll take another couple of seconds to walk all of us through this short photo presentation. And John was very kind to share some of these photos with us. It is indeed a privilege and honor to have him with us today because, the spiritual quest, his spiritual quest took him to Thailand, spent time with Ajahn Chah, and thereon, in Australia, setting up monastery. And now he's the director of public programs at the Theosophical Society in America. So the spiritual journey has continued in various positions, various places. He may have transitioned from one form to the other, but it is indeed our fortune that we have him with us today, and we'll get to hear his wisdom as we hear about the life and the time he spent with Ajahn Chah. It would be difficult to separate the two, so therefore how his life intertwines with his time with Ajahn Chah is what we will get to hear. So in the video that we were just seeing, we already saw some of these photos, but there was a lot about Wat Papong that was spoken about in the video, not so much about Wat Pa Nanachat. And interestingly for us, this community, most of us here today do not understand or speak Thai. It is really English, and through English, our native languages is what we understand. So setting up of Wat Pa Nanachat was a landmark for so many people in their lives, how the teachings from the Thai masters have come to us. And John was part of that entire process, a couple of those starting years, and also being an abbot, as Bhante Mahapanyu was sharing. So in this photo, he's there in the last row behind, in the second right side. And that's the life as a monk. There were no buildings, no concrete, no regular things as we see at Nanachat today, but it was just that ground and the forest that they had to start with, and he was part of this process. He was in 1978 or around that time, he was also the co-abbot of Wat Pa Nanachat. So here we have formerly Ajahn Pabakro and Joseph Capel, who's with us today. Sitting behind on the left side, alongside is John, and then in the front we have Ajahn Pasanno, who was visiting then. I also learned from John how he had contributed to the setting up of the Maichi section, and therefore, as the lay community was growing, how he, in some sense, influenced Ajahn Chah to set up a Maichi section in Wat Pa Nanachat. So that experiment, and here's a photo from that where we see a couple of Maichis on the left side of the Buddha statue. And as I said, this all intertwines with the journey that Lumpur Cha was also having during this time. He had fallen really sick, as we know. Physically, his physical body was not keeping very well. And in 1982, around that time, when he had almost lost his speech, that was also the time that John transitioned. And from there, he moved from Thailand, he moved to Australia. So this is a photograph from that time. We couldn't exactly put the years, etc., or pinpoint to the dates, but it's all a general sense of the time it may have been. So lots of memories, I believe, John, but I'll just pass it on to you to talk about your time with Lumpur, but also your own journey in this Thai forest tradition before and beyond. And then maybe we can take a couple of questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dipti and Mahapanyo, Venerable Mahapanyo. Thank you so much for inviting me, and of course to the rest of the people who are attending this commemorative service in memory of Ajahn Chah's birthday and his life. The video that you just saw was beautiful, brings back many wonderful memories, and inspiring. I think that's the main purpose of it. I am grateful to be invited to speak a little about those years. It is a long time ago, as I indicated, and memory is a very strange thing. We only remember things that impact us, and we only remember those things in a subjective way. And that is why people always argue about what actually happened. Now, what I will share with you are some reflections of my experience as I remember them and how they impacted me. And how they impacted me is very subjective. The saying, which is often repeated, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think that is often misunderstood, or there is a different way of understanding it than the normal way that people usually understand. I take it to mean that the teacher appears to the student according to the abilities of the student. It doesn't mean that the teacher is not there, but how a student can integrate and learn from the teacher depends a lot on the student. And so even a great master such as Lumpur Cha, which I do sincerely believe he was, the impact of his teaching depended a lot on the students. And so how it impacted me was somewhat different than how it may have impacted other people. And of course, this has always been the case. We know that Venerable Ananda and Venerable Devadatta had the same teacher, the Buddha, and the result was quite different according to the students. So for me, my journey and experience with Buddhism in Thailand started in 1971. Not because I was interested in religion. I really felt more disinclined towards religion because I had a very skeptical temperament tendency. I don't believe things. So any religion that requires faith was doomed to failure for me. When I came to Thailand, I had a little exposure to Buddhism. It seemed very ceremonial, very superficial. I wasn't terribly interested until I came across an Australian man who took me to a meditation center in Bangkok, or Thonburi, Wat Pleng. And for the first time, I came across meditation. And I didn't know anything about meditation. I didn't know anything about Buddhism. But what intrigued me was that meditation was supposed to be a way to arrive at deep wisdom, deep insight regarding oneself, and find a true peaceful refuge within oneself. That was greatly appealing to me because as a young man at that time, I felt quite at a loss as to my purpose and meaning in life. And after many personal unsettling experiences, I decided that I should stop traveling to look at the different places and different aspects of cultures around the world and start looking within. And that was the start of my journey into Buddhism and Buddhist meditation. I ordained as a novice at Wat Pleng the beginning of 1972 and came across Jack Cornfield, who just returned from Burma. And he had put together a little booklet of all the meditation monasteries and teachers that he had come across in Thailand. And I was looking for a teacher. I was looking for someone who could help me develop and experience these deep states of peace and insight that Buddhism talked about. Wat Pleng was noisy, and the city temple is it wasn't very inspiring to me. So I went, as a novice, I went to a number of different monasteries, and I did hear of Ajahn Chah. So I traveled from Bangkok, caught the train. It was free for monks to travel by train, sit on a hard wooden bench to Warin station, arrive in the morning, get a tuk-tuk and go to Bangor, which is a couple of kilometers from Wat Pah. And so sometime around March of 1972, I walked from Bangor and arrived at the gates at Wat Pah, as most of the monks had already gone out on alms round. And as I enter the monastery, walking down this road lined by forest, I see this rather rotunda man walking towards me, and he very slowly and gracefully. And as he approaches me, I stop and I recognize this is Luang Por Chah from the photo. And as I look at him, he smiles at me, and all of a sudden my nose starts bleeding and I'm all covered in blood. And he thought it was very funny. I couldn't understand a word he said. He just said, "Go inside, go inside." And that was my first encounter with Luang Por Chah, which what significance it has, I don't know, but he was very accommodating. I didn't speak any Thai, and he didn't speak any English. There were Ajahn Prabhakara and Varapanyo had been there as novices, and they both spoke some Thai. But anyway, during my visit there, I thought I liked the place. Ajahn Sumedho was not there at the time, so Luang Por Chah arranged me to go to stay a few days with Ajahn Sumedho, who I think was staying at Wat Tham Sang Phet. And during my couple of weeks there, I was impressed, but I was kind of a bit intimidated. The austerity of the life, the demands of that type of training, the expectation that Luang Por Chah had, that you make a commitment of 5 years, was not something I was ready to do. And actually, it just seemed like, there was no way I was going to stay. And I did not stay there for that, after that short period. And so for my first rains retreat, I spent at a meditation center in southern Thailand because I really wanted to meditate, and that was my main interest. I thought that meditation would be something that you kind of, you just do that and you get this result and you're done. And I thought, well, 3 months should be long enough for me. And it was a very humbling experience. Actually, that rains retreat, I quickly realized, and this was one of the insights, that this would take quite a long time. And I really needed a place where I could relax and learn to live naturally in a meditative way and develop it as a lifestyle rather than a retreat. And so that led me to return to Wat Pah Pong at the beginning of, towards the end of 72 or the beginning of 73, I don't remember. And because I had ordained as a monk in Wat Plang, and therefore I was not really, they were not very strict with regards to Vinaya or the rules of discipline. Any visiting monk at Wat Pah Pong at the time was considered a visitor, and a kanduka, not one of the community. And you were treated like that. You were put at the end of the line and kind of semi-accepted as a monk, and not quite part of the community, not allowed to share in the Patimokkha recitations. You walked always at the end of the line, even the youngest monk. And he did that with all the visiting monks, and there were a number of us that year, and kept us in that position for, I think, for three months, until he thought it was appropriate that we'd made sufficient, shown sufficient interest and commitment that he would accept us as students. And there was this big ceremony of where the Akanduka monks were then integrated into the Sangha of Luang Por Chah. They took what you had to give up everything that may have been bought by money. You had to give up your robes and your bowl and any little thing. So you're more or less reborn. And they give you these old robes and some old bowl, but it was all according to Vinaya. And so then you were a part of the community. And that was really an important thing. I really felt like, at last, I'm at home. And Luang Por Chah was very inspiring to me. I think what Ajahn Sumedho said in this short video just previously, that the way Ajahn Chah appears is this state of naturalness, this state of complete ease and comfort, regardless of the situation, the environment, or the people, or where he's at. And this is a very impactful thing, because even though you don't understand, you feel it. I felt that this man was whole, this man was stable, this man had some refuge, inner refuge that, I needed. And also I'd had a troubled youth, and, I never really had a father figure that I had felt greatly drawn to. And that was my failing, not the failing of my father. So I really, this Luang Por, the great father, he for me was it, a spiritual father. And that was all wonderful. Not that the life there was easy, but I didn't mind the hardship. I didn't mind, the one meal a day, getting up early. I wanted to meditate. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be a good monk. But shortly after he accepted us into the Sangha, it came close to the Rains retreat, and it was his tradition to send off the new Western monks to different branch monasteries. And this is one of the things that I feel still to this day rather disappointed in. The branch monasteries were growing very fast. There were many of them. And often the abbots or the monks who were sent to be in charge of these monasteries were very young and inexperienced. And I must say, not very inspiring teachers. So anyway, he sent me to Kamchai, which was a very far away in Mukdahan, one of the northeastern provinces. Very new monastery, just recently established, a forest where the young monk, who was brawny and very strong, avid, he'd only been a monk for about 5 or 6 years, loved to work. And all they wanted to do was work, physical laboring, building things and making paths and clearing the forest and preparing them, building a monastery. And it was not at all why I had ordained as a monk. And so I was very disheartened by that. And, I really resented that situation. And to the extent that I felt the only way I could do more meditation was to fast 1 day a week so that I didn't have to go on Pindabata or on alms round. And so I didn't have to go to work. I was exempt from laboring and I could meditate. And so I did that for the Rains Retreat. And, after the Rains Retreat, I went back to Wat Pah Pong, and I wasn't very happy. I wasn't very contented with what I'd experienced, and I really didn't make much progress. However, during that Rains Retreat, I did make an effort to start learning Thai so that I could speak. I learned from this book, and I picked up sufficient to be starting to speak. And Ajahn Chah asked me, what's the, how is it? What's the problem? I said, there's no teacher here. And he said, what do you mean there's no teacher? You've got eyes, you've got ears, you've got nose, you've got tongue, you've got body, you've got mind. They're your teachers. And I've repeated that as something very wise. It is very wise. But you can only learn from a teacher if you're able to understand what the teacher is saying to you. And I really didn't have enough of a foundation to really learn just from my own situation. I felt a bit adrift. So back at Wat Pah Pong, and again, having some interaction with Ajahn Sumedho, it was fine. I'm still very inspired until the next Rains Retreat. He sends me to another remote monastery, which is the abbot just wants to work, more work. And so, to cut the story short, my frustration during the first 2 or 3 years of living with Rinpoche was this ongoing battle and kind of a resentment. This idea of having to be physically actively working on physical projects with so little time for meditation. And the other one was noise. Often the monasteries could be quite noisy in some places. And so this tension was ongoing within me. Again, it was just the places I was sent. And I got very sick. I got malaria and I got dysentery and I got typhoid and typhus. And like most monks, got very sick. And it came to a head. I went back to one of the other branch monasteries, and it was out of desperation. I cried for help. I committed some serious offenses that caused me to be sent back to Wat Pah Pong in shame. And Rinpoche wouldn't even speak to me. And I was I used to say, bones, robe and bones, rather than robe and bolo. I was very extraordinarily emaciated, skinny, and undernourished, and again with malaria and chronic malaria that would come every second day. Rinpoche wouldn't speak to me. So one day I went from my kuti, where I was staying, to his kuti. He used to sit under his kuti and receive guests, and I go there, and it's one of the days where you get very cold first, and then you get the very hot sweat later on in the day. And it was one of those days. So I go and sit under the kuti with Luang Por Chah, expecting that he would see me, feel pity for me, and send me to the hospital. And I sat there for 2 hours. He never said a word to me. And he was talking to everybody else and completely ignored me. And completely exhausted, I just crawled back to my hut until the next day. And the next day I come out of my hut towards the sauna, and Luang Por Chah is walking from his kuti, and he sees me. And he comes over to me, and he looks straight at me, and he says, "Why?" I mean, "Why are you so stupid?" And I kind of, I said, I was just experiencing a lot of dukkha. And he said, "You're stupid." And he sent me to the hospital. And after that, he was very kind, and it really helped me to get better. Sent me to a monastery in central Thailand, which had much better conditions, good food, and no malaria, because the doctor said I had to get away from areas where there was malaria, otherwise it would just reoccur over and over. And that rains retreat was my fourth rains retreat. And it was time to get healthy again, to feel, it was an amazing experience, really, because for 3 months during that retreat, I was completely obsessed with one thing only: food. I was starving. I was hungry. It was amazing. I thought this was just kilesa, just a defilement. I mean, since the malaria had been cured or in remission, all of a sudden I just felt ravished. And the food would come down. I'd fill my bowl. I'd eat everything. I'd go back to my kuti and walk meditation and have visions of food. I'd sleep and think of food. I thought I was going a little bit obsessive compulsive disorder or something, until one day I'm sitting in the line and the food comes out and I'm not interested. And it was really just like that one day. And I look at my arm and I say, "Oh, I'm full." My body had regained its normal, healthy state. And that hunger and craving for food was not kilesa, it was just the body hunger. Anyway, after that rains retreat, that was the year that Wat Nanachat was first established, 1975. That group of initial Western monks with Luang Por Sumedho went there and spent the rains retreat there, the first rains retreat. I was not there that year. I was in Ayutthaya. But at the end of that year, I went to Wat Nanachat to stay with the Western Sangha. And this was the great insight of Luang Por Chah. Often we think of a teacher, that's so important, and it is so important, but it's not unusual for a teacher and his teaching to be so personified and personalized and focused on that individual, that once that individual is gone, it loses continuity. And many of these famous teachers don't leave much behind. This was not the case for the Buddha, of course, because we have Buddhism. And why do we have Buddhism? It's because of the Sangha, the strong emphasis on the Sangha, the community of monks, because it was the Buddha who put forth the wheel of Dhamma, but it's the Sangha who followed over the millennia who've kept that wheel rolling. And this is what I think very important about Luang Por Chah. It was he who inspired so many, but really what's kept his lineage and his memory and his teaching relevant and so vibrant is because of the emphasis on Sangha, the emphasis on establishing a community of monks who could live according to the Vinaya, practice according to the Dhamma, and therefore be living examples of that teaching from one generation to the other. And I think that was his great insight and genius in establishing Wat Nanachat. Because he saw that as the Western monks were being drawn to him, the only way that they would be able to really evolve and maintain the tradition was that they had to become independent as a Sangha, be able to live as a community of Western monks, which we had never done before Wat Nanachat. No one else had done it in Thailand. And it was not easy. When I first arrived at Wat Nanachat and with that initial group, I remember sitting at the Patimokkha with Lumpur Sumedho there and a couple of, there's always one or two crazy monks around, you know. And I thought, these people are crazy. It was difficult. There was a lot of conflict, disagreements, tension, personalities. You know, Western, unlike the Thais, we didn't have quite the same devotional temperament and very confrontational. Thais don't usually not confrontational, very opinionated and very eager to express their opinion. So there's a lot of friction and tension. If it was not for Lumpur Sumedho, who was a very mature, much older than the rest of us, well, much older, 10 years older, he really made it possible for Wat Nanachat to start. And even though Lumpur Chah had the vision, the insight, and the teaching, that it succeeded so well and instilled this Western Sangha to this day is, I think, a great portion of it is due to Lumpur Sumedho, who was the first disciple. Because for people like me, often, you know, Lumpur Chah was certainly the source of inspiration, but Lumpur Sumedho was the big brother. And I always felt such tremendous gratitude for his support, his wisdom. He was the example. He was somebody, you know, he was a Westerner, so he was very, very important. So my experience with Lumpur Chah was primarily at Wat Ba Pong for periods, at his branch monasteries for periods, and then I was at Wat Nanachat for 4 years. 1 year as an assistant abbot to Ajahn Pabakaro, who's here today. Thank you, Joseph. And 3 years as abbot of Wat Nanachat. And probably those were the years that I got closest to Lumpur Chah, because I would walk back and forth from Wat Nanachat to Wat Ba Pong and he would visit regularly. And I felt a great sense of confidence, you know, a tremendous sense of confidence, because it wasn't, I didn't have to rely just on me, my insight, my wisdom. I had Lumpur Chah, and I could, you know, he stood by me as my support. And he gave me the opportunity to shine, to be my best. Was I as good as he thought I could be? Maybe not. And that's another lesson about this whole experiment, is that Lumpur Chah put a lot of, you know, he saw a vision and he took steps to create something. You know, it is a bit of an experiment. He saw the potential of an individual and gave them the opportunity. Some of those young monks who were abbots failed. He made me the teacher I became in Thailand and then in Perth. And I felt very grateful and I felt very confident for a long time. And when I left Thailand was my last memory of Luang Por Chah was one of the photographs that was just shown. He was just recuperating from the illness that he had. He had deteriorated a lot, and it was shortly after that he stopped talking that year. And that was the last time I spoke with him. And I must say that when I moved to Perth, I lost a great deal of that that sense of confidence and support that was, so powerful in Thailand. But what sustained me for the many years in Perth was also the strength of the Sangha, that you feel you are part of a community with a heritage and a lineage that gives you, it's not just the individual, it's the community. It's the whole community supports this spiritual life. The purpose of a spiritual community is to help each individual reach a level higher than he or she can individually. And that is the power of the community. I'm sure that many of you will have questions, which I will be happy to answer to the best of my ability. I was not as close as Joseph in the sense of spending personal time with Luang Por Chah. As I said, he often sent me off to remote places, but I have memories of him that have left such strong imprints in my mind that I have great confidence in this teacher as a teacher who did not need somebody else's guidance. So I hope those recollections are worth something for you. And I think it's probably more interesting to have questions. So please feel free to ask. If you don't have any questions, that's perfectly all right as well.
Thank you, John, for helping us walk down the memory lane with you, and to be so candid in what you shared, because we always get to hear some side of the story, but there's something, a very personal experience that maybe that can only come when a person is speaking directly about that experience. There's so much to learn from that. Also, the importance of the teacher and the kind of support Sangha is in our spiritual journey. So I think we will invite questions now, so people can raise their virtual hand and we will take the questions one by one. But while they get and start thinking, maybe one question I will just bring forth right away, John, is that in your years as an abbot, I think we didn't talk a lot about that one. Which were the early years of the monastery itself, and what were the main challenges for you, even as an abbot, and for the monks who were there with you then?
At Wat Nan Achat?
Yes.
Well, at Wat Nan Achat, the first year or two were, I think, just for Western monks learning to live together and in harmony. It was, I think, challenging. There were many difficult confrontations, disagreements. Another one was just to establish a training for the new monks, to actually start being able to train in English. So there was at Wat Ba Pong, all the teachings were given in either Isan, the Northeast dialect, or in Thai. And there were not many translations of, say, the Vinaya. And so that was something that we had to develop, like a training for monks based on the routine and the schedules of Wat Ba Pong. So that was the one challenge. The other one that I feel was less challenging was the range of people who would show up, because by that time Wat Ba Pong and Wat Nan Achat had become a little well known. So we were getting a lot of Western travelers who would come to Wat Nanachad out of interest and wanting to stay. And so we had to develop, so what do you do with these people who want to stay? And so we had to set up a program so that if they can stay for 2 weeks and then they either shave their head and make a commitment to keep the 8 precepts, or they have to leave. And of those who stayed, because often people who are troubled are also attracted to meditation. Many people, this is one of the big lessons for me, was meditation is not a cure for everything. Meditation can be very helpful for many things. Monastic life can be very good, but it's not a cure, panacea for everything. People with mental problems and imbalances sometimes do need professional, or not sometimes, they need professional help, not a meditation retreat, not an intensive meditation. And we had some experiences with those. With my idea of establishing the nun section at Wat Nanachad, it was because we had a couple of nuns staying at Wat Ba Pong who really wanted to get better training, equivalent to what the Western novices and anagarikas were getting at Wat Nanachad, and opportunities to practice. And so they wanted to come and stay at Wat Nanachad. And, in respecting that, I tried to facilitate it and asked Luang Por Chah for permission to set up the nun section, which he wasn't terribly keen on, actually, because he said, it's problems, just asking for problems. Jagara, you're going to regret this. But I did set up a nun section, and I started to realize many problems. One of the nuns became anorexic, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what is anorexia. I don't know what do you do with somebody like that? And it was, in the end, when it became clear she was going to die, I had to disrobe and go back to England. And, it's just that it was a learning experience. It was a learning experience for the Western, young, new Western monks. Many of us, including Ajahn Sumedho, as I said, Luang Por Chah gave us the opportunity to be our very best. In other words, he asked Ajahn Sumedho to be abbot after only 7 years as a monk. And I'd been a monk for 7 years, and I became abbot. That's ridiculous, to be in charge of a community of 20, it was 20 monks and novices. It's a lot of people. It's way premature. So that was again, I say sometimes that was overreaching by Luang Por. But on the other hand, if he had not overreached at that time, maybe it would never have happened, because he stopped talking shortly after. And also, it was not overreaching for everybody, because Luang Por Sumedho is still there. We've got lots of very senior, wonderful monks, now 50 years in the robes. It's an amazing thing. So to say that Luang Por was overreaching is incorrect, I think. Luang Por gave the permission or the opportunity to be your very best and reach your highest potential. Not everybody succeeded. And maybe that was part of as I said at the beginning, it's the student. What the student can get from the teacher depends primarily on the student. It does. And this is why, that's when we talk about karma, your past karma, your past. It's not only what you do now, but what you bring with you when you start doing. And that's a lesson I've learned, and a very humbling lesson for me. a recognition, that it was, what I did, but what I brought was also very important, and maybe that was the limitation.
Yes, thank you. And everyone has their own journey. It's not the same. It's not all size fits. Same size fits also. Yeah, thank you for that. I know Reggie has a question. Reggie, please go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. I have a question. I just wanted to know if Ajahn Chah ever taught awareness of sensations, meditation using awareness of sensations, and what is your opinion of practicing awareness of sensations, Vipassana, as taught by S.N. Goenka ji? Can one reach the jhana stages using this technique? And could practicing this technique lead one to full awakening?
Well, with regards to Luang Chah's teachings, he certainly taught mindfulness of mind and body. And Vedana is certainly one of the aspects of mind and body, and mindfulness of feelings, pain and pleasure, and as well as emotions, the arom or the aramana that arise in the mind. That was his big emphasis of practice, was awareness, mindfulness of these objects of mindfulness. If it's a mental state, an emotion, a feeling, that's just an aramana. It's just a visitor to be seen as impermanent, and not to fight it, not to hold on it, to recognize it as a visitor and respond appropriately as needed. If not needed, don't respond to it, let it go. With regards bodily sensations, yes, Luang Chah was very much into developing awareness of bodily sensation, especially our aversion and fear of pain. And often he would, he would encourage us to really to be able to direct mindfulness on some unpleasant sensation, like sitting all night, or being not going without sleep, eating little, being, sick. These are all aspects of mindfulness. And he certainly encouraged that. With regards Goenka, who's he actually learned from U Ba Khin in Burma. And that particular technique of meditation, I think, is a very good technique of meditation. People are it's a very precise, systematic, no deviation. This is how you do it. And so it suits some people very well. I cannot speak from authority with regards it's, can you attain jhana using that technique? I mean, they do, as well as the sensation, they do anapanasati as well. So, I don't know, you'd have to ask them that. The only hesitation I have about that whole tradition is its rigidity. Once again, the rigidity, it has to be this way and no other way. I don't like that. The other one is that only Vedana, everything manifests through Vedana, and only by mindfulness of Vedana can you, that's what you're supposed to be mindful of. The Buddha didn't teach that. He taught mindfulness of mind and body, and thoughts and emotions and feelings, physical feelings, mental states. The Mahasatipatthana discourse makes it quite clear that Vedana is only one of the objects of mindfulness. So those are my only two kind of hesitations about it. But I must confess, I am impressed by the dedication of the practitioners of that tradition that I've met. They are dedicated practitioners, and I'm sure they derive great benefits from their technique of meditation.
Thank you, sir.
So on that note, maybe I can also mention that John has also written this book called as The Meditative Path, which has very good reviews on the internet. It's a great book for anybody who's especially, getting started even at a more intermediate level of learning. That's what I read in terms of the reviews, but it seems like a very good handbook for learning about the Buddha's teachings. So, John, there is a question, and I'm just going to paraphrase that, in your life journey, in your journey with Ajahn Chah, and then there was a time when you transitioned back into your lay life. How did you kind of continue your practice? And then, apart from that, because you spoke so much about being close to a teacher, another question is that for people who cannot be close to teachers, especially lay people, what would your recommendation be for them?
Well, to begin with the first part of that, or the first question there with regards myself, it is, for me, what happened was when I went to Perth to establish the monastery there, I would probably say, at kind of my apex of confidence and energy and enthusiasm, and still carrying with me the support of being with Lumpur Cha. And then Ajahn Sumedho helped, continued to help by visiting often. However, by the time, after about 10 years, and by having taken on so much other responsibilities and being involved in so many things and teaching in so many places, I really felt inadequate, because in the situation that I was, and this was my perception, I don't know that it's a perception, it was not imposed on me. My perception was the distinction that what I felt in Thailand was that if you are a very good monk and you are part of a sangha, and that's quite sufficient. Whereas gradually in Perth, what happened was the Western expectation, what I knew was far greater than what I had directly realized and directly experienced. And the more I taught, and the greater the community and the greater the success, the more inadequate I felt personally, because I really started to feel that I actually had to be the teacher, personifying these teachings, these realizations. And I really felt very inadequate, because my practice had not evolved anywhere near anywhere compared to what I knew, what I was teaching, because a lot of the times, I was channeling Lumpur Cha's teaching. And so I felt quite inadequate. And in the West, there is that sense of, if you say this, you've got to do it. You've got to really be speaking from your direct experience. And so I couldn't no longer speak from my direct experience, and being part of the Sangha wasn't quite sufficient. And so for me, it was a very extremely difficult time. I took a year off and went the year sabbatical and went on retreats to Sri Lanka and Burma to try and, to rejuvenate myself, my practice. But it was even more humbling, because I just got very sick, and I got very disheartened. And to be honest, I got quite depressed because of this sense of failure and inadequacy. And so when I went back to Perth and resigned from all my positions, and I was so grateful that Ajahn Brahm was there, and Ajahn Brahmawangso was able to take over, and is extraordinarily gifted teacher. But when I left, I really felt completely defeated. And it was like I'd lost all incentive, all drive, all I really didn't see a purpose for myself as a monk. And that's why I disrobed. Having disrobed, it's being reborn. When I became a monk, I had to be reborn. Now I was reborn at the age of 48, trying to find my my footing. And I'm very grateful to have ended up here at the Theosophical Society and still part of some sort of spiritual community. But to be honest, my practice is, I just lost the momentum, and I kind of resolved I would try and live my life comfortably. And I'm not going to take on any situation or position which is going to make me feel that inadequate again. So I live comfortably. I do what I want to do. If I meditate to be peaceful. I don't meditate to become peaceful. If I walk meditation, I walk meditation to be peaceful. I don't do it to become peaceful. And so that's my practice these days, which is very lax. So don't take me as an example. But I am the most contented I've been in my life. So to that extent, I'm grateful. Now, with regards, there was a second part to your question. When you don't have a teacher, today, fortunately, the great blessing of the internet and all the resources at your fingertips, you have access to so many teachers, so many teachings in English, so many wonderful books. The whole Tripitaka has been translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi and others into English. You have access to all sorts of teachings. And if you're fortunate to find a teacher either online or in person that you relate with, that is a great help. But even if not, a community of like-minded people, as I said, studying together, practicing together is sufficient. You can make great progress. But a lot of it just depends, again, on your aspiration and your willingness, and then your ability. That's it.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for that. I'll just go to the next question. The next question is about maybe slightly related to the previous first question, which actually reminded me of, having a healthy sense of self, which you were talking about, that coming out of that sense of inadequacy to feeling very adequate and content with where you are. So the next question is that after 23 years of monkhood, you had been a lay person now for almost 29 years. So somebody that has done that calculation. How do you integrate the lessons learned in both the lives, and what things would you do differently if given a chance again?
Well, as I've mentioned, I think I mentioned to Venerable Kevali, who's the abbot of Wat Nanachad, as I look back at my life, I really feel like I've lived 4 different lives. My life is very disjointed. My first 10 years, I lived as a peasant in a very poor part of Italy. I lived with a donkey and a cow. We slept in a stable. I didn't go to school until I was 7 or 8 years old. And I didn't have very much. My parents migrated to Australia to try and build a better life for us. And I went there when I was 10. I went to school, so that was a rebirth. I had to start from nothing. I didn't speak English. I didn't know anything. I'd lived on a farm. And it was a struggle to catch up, to learn English, to go to school, to get some sort of qualifications. And so that was my second life until the age of 22, 23. And I felt I was doing all right. I was not terribly secure. I was insecure. My mother died when I was young. I didn't have any sense of community support. I felt very insecure, and I felt very confused often, but not cowardly. No, I mean, I was really interested. I wanted to know. I wanted to. So when I finished college and worked for a year, I had money to travel. So I went traveling. I wanted to see the world. I was going to come to India, by the way, but I got stopped in Thailand, and that's where I stayed for 10 years. And so that was my next birth. I had to start I knew nothing. I had to become a monk. I had to learn how to wear robes. I had to learn how to walk as a monk. I had to learn Thai. It was all different. It was a rebirth, a new life. And I was a monk for 23 years. So that was one life. And they were very different lives. Each time I had to reinvent myself, and it's almost like learning to be something different. And then when I did this robe, it was again, it was quite difficult to just, what am I going to do? What are you going to do with a recycled Buddhist monk? It's like, what sort of job can I do? But again, I found my footing, and I must say, throughout all of this strange, disjointed and disconnected life, I have been blessed with good friends, or always with good friends, often much better than me, who acted as examples for me. And whatever good karma from the past, it seems to have managed to support me and protected me and kept me, quite well. And so I've managed to reestablish myself in a lay life. It wasn't necessarily easy. I'm very blessed to have a very good job, very good friends here, beautiful wife who's the most, often we talk about taking on a spiritual life and practice to become a better person. Well, my wife is naturally, just naturally, the most genuinely good-hearted, generous, pure-hearted person. And it's like, why is a person like that? I don't know. Again, it's something that comes from not just what we do now, but in the past. So that is, again, a great inspiration for me to be better, to try and be better. But I did not put myself forth as an example of what should be. I just look back at my life as an odyssey, and I see I made many mistakes. And as far as my monastic attempt at monastic life, I can say that too much emphasis on willpower and not enough emphasis on gentleness in practice. And part of that, again, is that tradition of Northeast Thailand, which Ajahn Chah did encourage, this kwam oton, and this endurance, patient endurance will burn away all defilements, kanti paramang tapo titika. But for maybe it works, and it obviously works for some people. For me, it actually instills some bad habits of meditation, the way we approach meditation. You approach meditation to be peaceful. And so you've got to approach it with that sort of peaceful attitude. The idea of, fighting your defilements, as Ajahn Mahabua, get in the ring and beat them and punch them. And that aggressive, I don't think it worked well for me. I did develop very strong will, and I could sit for 3 hours straight without moving, and I was not peaceful at all. I was alert, but not peaceful. And that is not the way to practice meditation.
Thank you. These very nuanced responses, I believe everybody can relate or take something, for themselves as lay people. Our next question, John, is that how do you reconcile the Theravadan approach with theosophy?
Well, theosophy is a later, 1875, Madame Blavatsky, Colonel Olcott, and Judge established the Theosophical Society with the three objects of open-minded inquiry into the world, religions, philosophy, science, the creation of the brotherhood of humanity, regardless of creed or race or sex, and the investigation of unexplained potential, human potential or aspects of the mind, if you wish, the unexplained abilities. So in that broad sense, it's extremely compatible. It's compatible with all open-minded science and religious people, spiritual people. It's not really open-minded. It's not comparable to a dogma. But then theosophy itself has got its set of doctrines, the teachings of Madame Blavatsky, especially the secret doctrine. I personally, I am not familiar with, I don't read it. I don't know. I say I'm a member of the Theosophical Society, the umbrella organization. Within that, there is the ES, the Esoteric School of the Theosophical Society, of people who study these teachings. I'm not a member of that. So with regards some of the more specific teachings of theosophy, according to Madame Blavatsky's and the secret doctrine, there are some differences from some of the Theravada teachings, subtle differences that one could, find difficulty accommodating. But in general, there is a vast agreement on, the practice sila and the importance of samadhi and karma. And I think the Theosophical Society has served a great purpose in helping to bring the teachings of India, both Hinduism and Buddhism and other Eastern traditions, to the West. The fact that, you could say they were the pioneers who brought some of these teachings, reincarnation and karma and even meditation, I think. But it's an old established organization. It's not, it's international. It's still vibrant. It does a good service. Buddhists can easily be part of it. It's very easy to be a Buddhist within the Theosophical Society. They have great reverence for Buddhism, and I often invite Buddhist monks to teach here. Buddhist monks teach at Ajahn in Chennai, the international school there. Ajahn Sumedho has taught at the School of Wisdom. So it's a very compatible, even where there may be some doctrinal differences that, if you go into the details, they may differ, but that doesn't, I'm a Buddhist, and that's fine. I'm happy to be part of the Theosophical Society.
Right, thank you. I would just invite audience, if there's any other question that you'd like to ask John, can you please raise your virtual hand or put it in the chat. We have a few more minutes to go. He doesn't look like John. I think we are very satiated with all that you had to share. Your honesty, I think, has been very, very, it really enlightened us in so many ways, because I think that's not what at least I anticipated to hear. And that these are the kinds of reactions that have come on the chat. Also, people are really thanking you for the various places where you've shown light, for lay people. Sometimes we believe something to be true for ourselves, but really to have that honesty to really examine oneself and see where am I or my practice in my life, and then accommodate or adjust to the situation, or to even determine that I need to be out of the situation. So thank you for that. Thank you very much for your time as well. To be with you is again a reminder that the one has to continue on their path in whichever form, and then again the great reminders about our teachers like Ajahn Chah, Lumpur Sumedo, and many others who have built foundations for us to practice, and at least given us some place where we can look up to. And then, of course, one takes on in their own direction and journey as well. I will now invite Mahapanyoji if he has any final words.
Thank you, very nice. Thank you, Dipti. So, John, yes, please accept my gratitude as well. And not just for this evening and your remarkable self-honesty, but also from my point of view for the wonderful legacy you and Joseph and others have left behind that's enabled people like me and many others to keep walking the path. So please accept great heartfelt gratitude for that. And it was really wonderful having you this evening. I think one of the things I've really learned is just your remarkable self-honesty. So much gratitude.
Thank you all
So
for.
we'll close in our.
I was just going to say thank you all for giving me this platform to speak, and also whenever I am asked to speak about Buddhism or the past, my past, it is a source of inspiration for me, because once again, it brings back all of that association with the teaching, the teacher, and that is very important to keep these memories alive, because it is so easy to just forget. And when we forget, then we lose that. So I'm very impressed by the gathering, so many of you, and joining together for this commemorative service in this wonderful way. And I'd like to thank Dipti, and in particular, Venerable Mahapanyo, for inviting me.
So we'll close in our traditional style. We'll bow down to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namassami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Okay, thank you very much, and good evening, good night to all. Or good morning to you, John. You're on the other side of the world. So thank you. See you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you.